The mood music is lovely, but if we could, thank you very much. Right, hello and welcome to what is, a first. You are excited and lucky enough to be here for the first physical session of a new working group. And, there's that whole thing in the IT industry about having sat at the same desk for a long time and worked for multiple different companies. And I find myself in having a slightly similar feeling today as we launch off on a new endeavor. What once was anti-spam, that we rechartered as anti-abuse, and is now the new RIPE security working group. So welcome one and all to the security working group. I am Brian Nisbet. With me in person is Marcus de Bruin, and unfortunately Tobias is not well. He'll be fine, but not well enough, unfortunately, to fly and to join us. We're half hoping he might be online, but I'm not sure if he'll manage that or not. So yeah, this is all very strange and new. Some things will be very similar because I'm lazy. And if you've been to anti-abuse working group sessions and indeed anti-spam in the past, you'll find this slide deck looks remarkably similar because again, it seems to work. So we're gonna it's a slightly strange kind of pattern through this. We're gonna stick with some of the administrivia stuff that we would normally do, but we are gonna come back to the recharter. That's not it. I'm not just kind of mentioning it and then just wandering off. So, as I said, welcome. Thank you to all the NCC staff and indeed the venue staff, the AV folks, and the wonderful stenographer, indeed the Meet Echo team, all of whom come together. A huge number of people working in the background to make this whole meeting happen, the plenary, the working group sessions. It's all awesome. And thank you to all of you for that. This is a hybrid meeting. If you're in the room, then there are microphones if you wish to ask questions, do things. If you're on Meet Echo, you can also request browser permissions for, you can request voice or video permissions to ask your question, or you can type it into the Q&A and we'll read it out here. We probably should put some sort of character limit on just how long a question we'll read out as chairs or indeed program committee people, but that's a different conversation for a different time. This is a part of the RIPE meeting and therefore it falls under the RIPE Community Code of Conduct. Just to be aware of that, it's all good and positive. There is the possibility to rate the content in this working group as there is for all. It's not quite the same as the plenary, but if you have feedback, that's a way of giving it in the same way as giving it in person to us after the session. Or if you really have an opinion at the microphone at any point in the session, that is absolutely fine. So we have minutes from RIPE 88. That draft minutes have been circulated some time ago. If there are no comments in the room at this point in time, I'm going to consider them approved. Seeing and hearing nothing, they are approved. Thank you very much. We updated the agenda as recently as a couple of hours ago, but are there any other points that anyone wants to add on the agenda? We do have an A.O.B session at the end, but just if not, we will continue with the agenda then. Cool. So what's the big update, you ask? Well, we've rechartered. We may have mentioned this. We had a bunch of conversation in Krakow. The working group chairs went away and considered this and made a couple of tweaks to the charter, issued it on the mailing list. I think I will say less discussion than we had hoped, but the discussion we did have was positive. So we have, after consultation with the RIPE chair team, gone ahead with the charter. We are going to have a new mailing list. There was a mail sent to the mailing list during the last week by Marita. We're actually going to make the hard cutover next week because, I am fundamentally an operations person at heart, and I feel making changes like that in the middle of a meeting when everyone is distracted is a bad idea. So the old mailing list still exists for the moment, but we will make the full cutover to use the security-WG mailing list next week, once Marita and the ops team in RIPE have had a chance to rest after a very, very busy week. And the working group chairs will also have a new mailing list for we ran a working expired. Tobias and Marcus were the two people who put their hands up to work as working group co-chairs along with me for another term. There was support on the mailing list. There was no dissent on the mailing list. So again, unless there is anybody who wants to say anything in the room right now, we will consider that a done thing. And congratulate them on once again being willing to volunteer. And thank you for that. So yay, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I think recent list discussion, there has been some. We'd like to see more, but it was about the charter. There was some about about the charter, about the other piece. The working group chairs didn't really feel there was anything that we wanted to talk about here from the list discussion. But again, if anybody in the room wishes to, this is your opportunity to do so. And again, seeing nobody else standing up, I'm going to keep talking. But that is the end of the update part. So now we're going to move into other people talking. And we're going to move, first of all, into our interactions piece. So Hisham, who I think I saw singing into the room somewhere, he's at the very back. So Hisham from the RIPE NCC. This is kind of a lightning talk version of something that'll be talked about more in the meeting, especially in co-op tomorrow, but I'll let Hisham talk about that. So just, no, it's fine. You don't have to run. No, don't run up the steps. It's dangerous. Cool.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hisham Ibrahim. I work for the RIPE NCC, and I've been given 5 minutes of fame during this working group to do a shout out to a talk that I'm actually going to be doing in the cooperation working group on Thursday. So I don't have slides for this because it's only 5 minutes, but just the gist of the talk will be um, post-COVID, we have seen a lot of interest from governments in the internet. That could have different reasons, either geopolitical tensions or advancing digital agendas of different countries. Now, part of the work that I do at the RIPE NCC is we have a team that specializes in dealing with public policy and internet governance. That means that that team deals directly with governments and gets a lot of requests for information. Now, by governments, it's a broad term. That could be LEAs, that could be regulators, competent authorities, ministries, and so on. And what we're seeing is a lot more questions related to how they see and interpret the work that we've been doing here in the community. To just give a quick example, the use of country codes in the database. The way that they see and interpret this is these are national sovereign resources, and they want to understand why the resources went down or went up because of a closure or because of a transfer or stuff. Now, we work with them and we explain how the system works, and that's usually quite useful. However, what we're seeing more and more is increase in these kind of questions. Now, one of the things that is changing is making this, and until now, like I said, it's the conversations have been useful and constructive, and um, we're not seeing weird requests coming in for information. Nothing that we cannot share. So we're not sharing any private data. We're only talking about publicly available data. However, things are changing with new regulation coming into Europe. A few things that we are still assessing the impact on the RIPE NCC, like NIS2, and like that looks into the supply chain, and we are as an organization as part of the supply chain for all our members. We're seeing things like e-evidence, which will allow for more sharing of information across of EU countries. However, our service region has 70-something countries. 50 of them are not European. And one of the things that my team and I are looking into and trying to understand is what does it mean when we start sharing a little bit more within Europe and European countries? What does that mean for the non-European countries? And the idea that I would like to have some discussion about, if we have time here, but also in cooperation and probably on the mailing lists, is what are the principles that we would like to see in some kind of information sharing like this? We're never going to give out personal data. We understand GDPR, we work with that, we do that, but we also understand that our members are in jurisdictions that have also data protection laws. How does that play out for them? These are things that, like I said, I'll be covering in the talk. I'm happy to cover if there's any initial thoughts or suggestions here. I'm not coming in with a solution, but rather, hopefully we agree on a direction and understanding of what we want to be doing and seeing moving forward ahead of having to be regulated. I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts at this point, if there are any.
Apparently there are.
Erik van Uden, AVM, but speaking for myself,
Mhm.
you're on the Dutch law, I think.
Yes.
So I think the discussion, from my point of view, is very easy that the Dutch people are more or less regulating what you should or must or can share, or I'm completely wrong.
So this is where, like I said, as it currently stands, we actually have a RIPE document, 675, if I remember correctly, that actually speaks to that. So under what kind of conditions do we share, especially information with law enforcement agencies? And that covers, as you said, you need to get a court order from the Netherlands to get that done. So, and that is, like I said, practice until now. Now with e-evidence, that opens it up not just within the Netherlands, it opens it up to 20-something countries within the EU. which changes the equation. So everybody else was at a disadvantage that they have to go through MLATs and they have to go through Dutch courts. Now you have 20-something countries in our service region versus 50-something countries that do not have that privilege, right? And as a team that looks into potential risks and understanding what this might mean for, potential regulation that we or our members might be hit with, we need to look into all these options and have this discussion with the community. Do we need to look into revise stuff? Because that document will be revised anyways because of evidence. Do we want to add more principles or more thoughts in there? And that's a discussion I'd like to have.
I mean, I hear the Seychelles is nice this time of year. Any other, I mean, again, this will be discussed in co-op. This is not going to be, this is not something that's going to be suddenly done in the course of the next 5 to 10 minutes.
No.
But if there are any other thoughts now, obviously you can speak to Hisham and the team.
Yes.
At coffee breaks and things like that as well.
Yeah.
So cool, thank you. We look forward to seeing this in co-op tomorrow as well and continuing to talk about it. Yeah, and please keep us in the loop.
Co-op on Thursday, and please find me in the coffee breaks. I'm very interested to hear more thoughts from the group. Thank you.
Cool, fantastic. Thank you very much. So if we could bring Antonia's slides up, I think, please. Yay, excellent. So we have Antonia Affinito from the University of Twente, who will be talking to us about unveiling domain blocklist performance. So 4 years of analysis. Please, Antonia.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, or probably good evening at this point. My name is Antonia Affinito. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Twente. And today I will present you something about domain blocklist performance and analysis over 4 years. This is a work in collaboration also with the University of Napoli in Italy. So I think that this is like a security session, so I expect that many of you already know what the block lists are, but for a few of you who never used this block list, so I would say that there are collections of malicious or suspicious domains that are used to, for example, block malicious websites, and also to protect in this way the users in order to avoid cyber threats. These kind of lists are basically created and maintained from several entities. So we can talk about companies. So these companies basically are creating this list and providing this list to the users in order to protect the users or to protect other companies. Usually they require users to pay a fee. But also research institutions or individual contributors are creating and maintain this kind of block list. Usually, in most of the cases, these block lists are provided for free. So, like, for example, research institutions are using, and for example, we are using this block list for identifying malicious domains in our data. Which is the problem is that when we, basically my main research interest focus on detecting cyber threats. And so we were using this block list for our research purposes. But then we were wondering, what are we using, what this block list can contain, which kind of domains, so how do they detect these domains? And we saw that they basically differ in detection speed, update frequency, and domain overlap. So then we were wondering, okay, but can we analyze what they include? For this reason, we provide a characterization of domain block list effectiveness and evolution over 4 years period. In particular, we want to understand if the entries that are included in this block list are outdated or are there still domains, still valid domains. And for this reason, we use also external validation tools. And also we try to understand and figure out some prominent characteristics in these data sets. We we analyzed and collected like 13 domain block lists for 4 years. So in particular, it was from March 2020 until August 2024, so a little bit more than 4 years. And we decided to analyze different kinds of block lists. In particular, these block lists contain different kinds of the categories of cyber threats. For example, like the most used ones we saw that are, for example, OpenFish, Phishing Army, or PhishTank, that they include domain names associated with phishing categories, or Spam House that contains different kinds of categories of these malicious domains, or I don't know, Cybercrime Tracker contain domains that are basically related to malware or command control activities. Of course, we are not the first ones in analyzing this block list in general, because of course there are not just domain block lists, but more in general, the like IP block list, URL, and many other block lists. Usually, like the other works that we found out is that they use, for example, honeypots in order to figure out, like, to simulate interactions. So try to collect these kind of malicious domains in order to understand if they are still malicious and they are still valid. But also, many of these works try to compare block lists that contain the same kind of category. In this kind of work, we decide to not focus on one particular category for two reasons. The first one is because, of course, like a particular domain name can be also used for different cyber threats at the same time. So, for example, phishing domains can be also used for, I don't know, spam. And also because we were wondering, like, a specific block list, for example, PhishTank, is including just phishing domain names. Are they sure that they are just phishing domains, or we can find also other kinds of categories? So it's a research that we have just started, and we are still figuring out some results. So I will show you some our preliminary results. And in particular here, we see that we started by looking at the number of domain names that are included in this block list, because we collected this list for 4 years. So the idea was to understand how they expand, or like how they reduce the number of domains in response to new cyber threats, because of course we know that there are like cyber threats every day, new kinds of cyber threats every day, and it's like trying to understand their evolution. In particular, here we see, like, we calculated 3 different metrics. So the total number of domain names, the number of second-level domains included in this block list, but also the domains with subdomains. It's something that I did? No. With subdomains. The idea of analyzing also the second-level domains, but also the domains with subdomains, was to figure out also if these block lists create a problem of overblocking or underblocking. And starting from this red plot, basically we see that there is a decrease of number of domains over time. But it's nice because we see that there is an increase of number of domains with subdomains and a decrease in the number of second-level domains. This is like just an example of the other plots. But another interesting aspect is related to this one that is also reported in other block lists, but this is just for an example. So the number of domains remain constant over time. At this point of the research, we said, okay, probably because this kind of block list, they wanted a specific number in their data, but also because actually they never changed their entries in the block list. And actually, we figure out from our study that this kind of block list was also like used a lot in research purposes. But then we see also other block lists where basically that are the most used ones, so the PhishTank, Phishing Army, and DBL, Spam House DBL, that we see an increase over time. And especially for DBL, so in the beginning, for the first years, they were not providing domains with subdomains, but they were focusing on second-level domains. Instead, from 2024, at the end of 2023, we see an increase also in the number of the subdomains. From this plot, so basically we saw that there were some block lists that were having a constant number of domains over time, some others that were increasing or decreasing over time. So then we were wondering how often they update their entries. So then we calculated the similarity coefficient in order to understand how often these domains are updating in this list. In this case, I reported just 3 of the examples, but it's, of course, a consideration that we can expand to the other list. And we see that, for example, in the last case, the coefficient is very low, meaning that the entries in this block list are changed very often. In the second case, instead, we see basically the yellow color. It means that the similarity coefficient is very high, meaning that probably these domains are not updated so often, or maybe because these domains are malicious over 4 years. It's like possible that these domains are malicious for 4 years or they are not detected or removed. And in the first case, for example, and in the case of the phishing army, this is an example that we see also in other block lists. We see a sort of, it's basically in the middle. So we see that there are like for some days where the similarity coefficient is high, and for other days, basically, it's low, meaning that these domains are remaining in the block list for a longer period than the one of the last case. But of course, these entries are updated if we compare with the second case. So, like summarizing, we saw that basically there are some block lists that are the coefficient is like very low. For some others, is very high. So then we were wondering, okay, we need to analyze these kind of domains that they include. And for this reason, we have used the DNS data. So we have used the DNS-COF in order to get the last in of these domains. So are these domains still active, or are these domains updated? And here I put like some red and green arrows. And in particular, with the red arrows, we can see that there are like some block lists that contain domains that are that were like active up to 4,000 days ago. So like their expiration date was 4,000 days ago. So from 500 to 4,000 days. That's basically, it means that these domains were never removed from the block list over time. In the green one, basically, there is the higher probability of including active domains, even though like also spam house and phishing army that are the most used block list. Also, like in this case, they contain a higher number of domains that are active, but also a small number of domains that are basically in this block list for long period. What about the overlap? Basically, we said, okay, now, but if we use a particular block list, are we blocking all the domain names related to phishing? Are we safe? And in this case, basically, we evaluated the overlap coefficient that is very low in all the cases. We evaluated like 66 combinations of all the block lists that we analyzed, and only among like up to 66 combinations, only the 70% of this combination exceed like 0.5 for this coefficient. And it's interesting because in the first case, we see basically an overlap of these two block lists. That makes sense because they include domains belonging to the same category. But in the second case, so fish tank and phishing army, it's like very interesting because as from the documentation, the second one is getting domains from the first one, but and also from other sources, but actually the overlap is like very low. We were expecting something higher. But at this point, we said, okay, the overlap is very low. Why? It's because some other block lists are slower, or just because they are not able to detect these domains. And so from our analysis, we tried to understand the detection delay of this block list. And it's interesting because Cybercrime Tracker basically is the block list that includes the highest number of domains with the highest number of domains that are not active anymore. But in this case, we see that the detection delay is like very low. Because what we saw is that some domains are renewed after some years, but they never got removed from this block list. So basically, they were already detected from this block list, while some other block lists that are more used, like they never they got it after a few days. So for example, after 10 days or after 11 days, even though they use also similar methods for the detection, so user reports or like crawlers. So in conclusion, what we saw is that making a comparison of the domain block list that we basically use a lot for our research purposes and trying to understand what is malicious over the network. This kind of block lists, of course, they vary in update frequency, and many of them are also including domains that are outdated also like for many years. That's also like an interesting aspect of these domains. And also that the overlap is very low. And this especially is low not only among the block lists with different categories, that can be something expected, but it's also very low among block lists that include the same category. So we saw the example of phishing. And so probably it's important that when we try to detect, or when we try to protect ourselves as users with this kind of block list, we should use multiple lists in order to increase our security. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments, questions?
So there is one in the mean echo queue. I will just grant him speaker rights, I guess.
I think.
Hi, that was me.
Yes,
Who,
I was going to say, the lights are very bright, but I was pretty sure it was you.
thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the good work you've done. It's very interesting.
Sorry, can you say who you are for?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Roy Arends. I work for ICANN. One of the reasons I find this very interesting is we've done some very similar work. We have, so I actually don't agree with the statement of work because it has been explored before, but that aside. Are you aware of the evaluation of reputation block list paper that we presented last year?
No, but it's something that I can for sure consider.
All right, because what is interesting, and it basically confirms your research and it confirms our research, is that the conclusions are basically the same. But interestingly, we have used 11 block lists and we overlap only 3. So it's basically a different set of sources that we use. We didn't do over 4 years, but over a couple of months. But it's what I'll do is I'll send you their presentation.
Yes,
this
sure.
is work from Samane and Sean Lloyd from the research from the SSR research team at ICANN. And I'll introduce you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, actually, we checked like combinations of all the block lists because, as I said, the idea was, can we identify also domains of other that belong to other categories of cyber threats in block lists that are basically using, for example, just one category. So that's why we found we did it. But then we focus also on the overlap of the same category, and also in that case, it's like very low.
Yeah, but what also was surprising is the 4 terms. We use slightly different terms, but we mean the exact same thing. Things like overlap, and I think we use churn and frequency and speed. So those 4 terms are using the same methodology, just slightly different terms.
Okay.
So good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Please.
Hi, I'm Paweł Godliński. I work for NASC, but primarily for the CERT-PL team. So thank you for the talk. We also did research into that quite a bit time ago. So I think we looked at the larger number of lists, and if you want, we can talk later, and I can share what kind of sources we are aggregated and what we did analysis on. I'm kind of not. I looked at the conclusions, and yeah, obviously I think with a smaller number of sources, you are seeing less overlap, as you probably would increase the number. That overlap would increase, and from our point of view, it's not necessarily the fact that there is overlap. It's not a disadvantage, because as long as there is some unique value, it's not a problem that 2 sources say the same thing. But when we tried to look at this evaluation, it was more from the quality and usefulness. And we found it pretty tricky to evaluate quality of those lists in a quantitative fashion. So have you kind of tried to look at from this perspective?
So like you're talking probably about false positives?
For example, that's one.
Yeah, actually, it's something that we are still working on, and the idea is to use external validation tools to check if also for example, if you consider various total that has up to 60 detectors, in that case, probably the idea we are trying to understand also for other tools these domains are malicious. And regarding your first part, I hope, on one end, I hope that if I look at like a bigger number of block lists, of course, I can see that the overlap is like higher. But somehow from our analysis, we see that if I focus on, for example, the block list of phishing, and if I read their documentations, I also see that they should include these domains, for example, of fish tank. So if I talk about Openfish or like Fishing Army, they should include the number of fish tank. But still, there are like a lot of differences between this list. But for sure, we can talk about this later. And I'm curious about your work.
Yeah, and also like we also try to consider the usefulness and the relevance of those lists, because there is like one, just because objectively the information on a list is true, does not make it useful for us for any like let's say protection purposes or filtering purposes. And also it might be maybe worth taking into consideration when you for the evaluation. But yeah, we can talk.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And I think I meant to say, of course, you're here as part of the Racy project as well. So thank you, and it's great.
Thank you for inviting.
This. And I think again the more of the interaction between the academic and where research has been done and more sharing is a very positive thing. So thank you very much. So someone turned around to me and went, as we were discussing things like piracy. That's what your group is getting into these days. So I would like to introduce Lee Kent from Bain, and it's Andrew Willatt. Yes, it is from the Premier League, to talk about the hosting of live piracy, the good, the bad, and the not so ugly. So please, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening.
No, you've got to.
Mike
is, yeah.
I should have worn a
remote
get you
one if you want.
In the interest of time, I'll
okay,
go through it.
We're good.
Yeah. So yes, brief overview. Mainly, this is what we're here to ask and to put to the community, and the story behind all of this we're going to go into. So, from Bain's perspective, we're not just a small organisation. As you can see, we've got quite a global reach, several languages, and a very broad spectrum of sports content. And that's just the sport. We also do movies and TV series as well. A little bit slow. And the reason that we are here to talk to you today is to look at this ecosystem. And as you can see, digital service providers, for us, are the key in order to prevent the theft and the criminalization of copyright and intellectual property crime. I'm going to pass over to Andrew now, who's going to do a little bit as well.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Andrew Willatt. I work in the Content Protection Department at the Premier League in London in the UK. So the Premier League is the organising body for the top 20 clubs in the competition. We broadcast our matches via broadcaster partners such as B&M Media Group in 189 territories in the world. And well, thank you, I would like to say, first of all, for inviting us to be here today to speak at the security working group of RIPE 89. So we are primarily here to let you know of the issues that we face relating to IPv4 addresses that are initially allocated by RIPE. But we also want to listen, we want to learn, we want to spend time with you to see if you can help us at all. So to go back to the slide, you can see, as Lee says, so each week, each Premier League match, what we're seeing are the same IP addresses, IPv4 addresses, announced by the same AS organizations, infringing our rights by delivering unauthorized live Premier League streams again and again and again. Now, there are some instances where we do know who they are. The contact information that is available from yourself is sufficient, and we can enter into communication with those entities. However, there are instances where the repeat infringement on a sustained basis continues, and the contact information is not sufficient for us to know who owns those IPv4 addresses, what jurisdiction they're in, and therefore we end up at a loose end. So those streams may be available in open websites, IPTV services, but the IPv4 address delivering that media is the same underneath, wherever that may be. And we do obviously also contact other infrastructure providers that are part of that delivery chain for the end user, for the viewer. But the key to it all is that media, which is delivered through the IPv4 address. And as you can see, and I'll pass to Lee shortly, what we're seeing, and this is the data, is that the vast majority of the owners, the ASNs that announce those IPv4s, are either RIPE members or are sponsored by a RIPE member. So if we do trace those IPv4s back to the roots, it is, in terms of the rears, we see as a RIPE issue right now, which is why we want to come and spend time with you and listen to you and hope that you can help us.
Thank you. So the good element is that as an organisation and working with the Premier League, is we have a very good outreach programme, and we're more than willing to talk to operators, wherever they sit in the ecosystem, basically, so we can have that good conversation. We want to understand what we're doing wrong, why those notices aren't reaching you, and why they're not being acted upon. And some examples we've had is just because they want it in a very specific language, they want it in a very specific format, and we're more than willing to accommodate that. I think as it stands from Bain's point of view, we are delivering takedown requests in about 6 or 7 different formats and about 9 different languages. It's not beyond our capability to be able to do that. And even if that was to escalate into the 10s or 100s, we would still be able to accommodate it. So these are good processes that we're happy to go through. We also like to work with organisations that have good repeat infringer policies as well, and making sure that those bad actors actually stay off the network. The greatest issue that we have is this element of DSPs. Those, as Andrew said, we see the same IPv4s week on week with the same domain names sitting on there week on week, and we can't speak to anybody. Despite extensive research, on-ground research, going to actual physical addresses, and they're just non-existent. And therefore, we have no form of communication with these organizations at all. They're not so ugly. Yes, we accept that there are some traffic that passes through, and they can be huge amounts of content that's passing through. The difference is we have somebody to talk to. There is an outreach program. We can work with those organizations and understand their challenges, big or small, and also depending on the organization as well. More than willing to sit down and help write policies and processes in order to facilitate the takedown of infringing content. So back to you guys, back to the community, back to RIPE NCC. We're hoping that we're not asking for the impossible or overreaching, and we simply would like a process or a level of communication that helps facilitate the protection of copyright and intellectual property on the internet. And I think we are good for any Q&As.
Okay. I'm supposed to sound closer to the camera. The other room gets 3 cameras. We just get 2. So I think that is a fairly straightforward kind of statement. And are there thoughts, questions, objections, discussion? Please.
Just a little question. Could you give us...
Sorry, can you say who you are, please?
Wolfgangzenker.de, speaking for myself. Could you give us an example of what you do to find out who is responsible? Maybe, well, unfortunately, there's some techniques to make it difficult to find the responsible person in who is requests, for example. So if you show us what you do, we might be able to give you a hint what you could do better.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's the sort of feedback that we're looking for. You know, are we doing the right thing, going through the right processes? So we will do an IP lookup. We'll use the various open source databases that are available to us, including RIPE and RIPE-Stat. We'll use BGP as well, and basically any open source database that we can get our hands on. And that's the information that we've got available. There is another session on Thursday where I'll go in a little bit more detail for under the database working group. But again, if we're doing something wrong, please tell us, because we would love to change it and make our lives a lot easier, to be fair.
Please.
Hello, Peter Thomason from DESEC. We mainly do DNS things. I have nothing to do with RIPE, and I don't know much about IP law with IP made in any sense. I just want to make sure that I understand your goal or request correctly. You mentioned that it's hard for you to get names of IP address owners. Is that the goal? Because it seems to be PII and, well, I don't know, like maybe it's better for all of us to understand how you would imagine an organization like RIPE perhaps just exposing that information. That seems like it could be difficult for RIPE as well to do. So is that what you're asking or asking something different?
Thank you for your question. And I think it ties into the first question as well in terms of being as clear as we can be about how we operate and what exactly it is we need. So essentially, when we're detecting these IPv4s being consistently used, when we do various lookups within the existing database facilities that are provided, if that contact information comes back that is not, as we would see it, true contact information for the operator of that AS org or the place of business, then we hit a dead end. Now, in terms of how that changes, maybe that conversation is further down the line and what that looks like. Again, that would be a community decision, of course, but I would hope it's in everybody's interest. If there is IPv4 misuse, that contact information could be provided in a suitable way that would allow organizations like us to have the conversation with the owner of the IP and not have to be in situations with taking your time like this. I hope that made some kind of sense.
Yeah, it totally made. And as I said, I don't know much about this, but I would be surprised if it was legal that RIPE would just give information to people who request it.
Well, I suppose it comes down, define contact information, obviously, of course, but yeah, that's perhaps another conversation for another day, exactly what that would constitute.
Please. No, I think you're possibly answering directly the question, Hans-Peter. So I think,
Yeah. So Hans-Peter Holen, Managing Director of the RIPE NCC. So just to clarify something the previous speaker said, in the RIPE database, there is contact information for all the registrants of the IP addresses. So that is not a matter of personal information or privacy. There should be contact information there. I think that's clear. What I hear you raising is a question regarding the accuracy of the database. the accuracy of the database is divided in two areas. One is what is in the registry. That's the responsibility of the RIPE NCC. We have just about 20,000 members, and we match those automatically through a third party to business registries. And we have a match of, I think, right, 96% of our members. So we know that we can match those to a business registry. No, of course, we don't know if that information is correct, but at least this is a strong indication it is. The remaining 4%, if we take out all the natural persons, because we also allow natural persons, we have a match of 99%. So we're left with like 180 organizations that we are investigating. So I'm pretty confident that we are able to make sure that the contact information for our members in the database is correct. Now, there are two other groups of information there. One is provider independent, which are PI space that's assigned directly to end user organizations through a sponsoring LIR. They are required to have a standard contract with the LIR, and we are checking that, but we do not have automatic matching of all those 20,000 yet. But we will get there. That's the responsibility of our members. We need to check those against in order to be sanctions compliant. So the reason we have a very high automatic accuracy on this level is actually a side effect of staying sanctions compliant. What we do not have, and what the RIPE NCC cannot, unfortunately, help you with, is the customer information for all our members. So take your random France Telecom or Deutsche Telekom or small ISP somewhere up in northern Norway. They register maybe their business customers, definitely not their residential customers, and whether or not you will find accurate information there in the database, that will be up to them. Of course, if we discover that they're not compliant with RIPE to keep their registrations up to date in the database, we will follow up on that. So if you find inaccuracy in the database, you can report them to us, and our investigation department will investigate that. So that will be very generic answers to your questions. I'm confident that we have processes in place, but I'm also quite sure that you will find holes. And one hole that I have not talked about is legacy address space, because there we have done a lot of cleanup and have contracts and have assured a lot of it, but we also have an amount of that is not to that level of accuracy yet. And there is a RIPE Labs article on the details of that. So there is definitely more work to be done in that area. So I think, the short version, the content information for our members should be accurate. If it isn't, report it to us, and we will follow up with our member to make sure that it is. But with the end users out there, whether that's a teenager on their PC or a small company doing a hosting service as a customer, that may be much more difficult, but then you need to go through their upstream to their ISP. So I hope that clarifies a bit. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for all that information. It is really good to know. And as I say, we do want to learn as much as we possibly can, and obviously work with you or around the best practices for contact information, to learn things we might be missing or to highlight the instances, as we have already with the security group, where we still believe the contact information is false or misleading. But thank you.
Yeah, and I think without trying to put more work on the lovely NCC staff who are here, there are registration services staff, and the team here at the meeting, who I'm sure would be very happy to talk to you as well about this. Yeah, please. It's built for Dutch people. It's a thing.
Maybe I'm just too short. Hi, my name is Piracy, and I have Digital Medusa, which aims to protect the internet and defend the open, global, interconnected internet. And one of the reasons that we try to avoid takedowns at the IP level and the network level is that because it's a very disproportional measure, and it could have an impact on innocent people that have not actually infringed upon content. So I'm wondering how much of this are you doing through UDRP? This is why we came up with the domain name resolution, because that is kind of a little bit less disproportionate. So how much of this can be done through UDRP and processes like that? And why do you have to rely on taking the IP addresses down or going through that? Thank you.
No, of course, we perhaps go into more detail another time about how we verify kind of the packets of data that are received via IPv4, but ultimately with kind of the multifaceted, complex world of online piracy, whatever the format of that live stream is, that IPv4 address that delivers the media to the viewer is a single point of failure. So one piece of action can have the greatest amount of impact, and that owner of the IP address, whatever server that's placed on, can have that impact. But obviously we're aware of the significance of proportionality and not over blocking ever. But yeah, that's one we can discuss outside afterwards, perhaps.
Yeah, just on UDRP, we're filing on average probably 10 a week. It's an expensive process, to say the least. But it's because it's linked to trademark, and you have a streaming website that says, "Hello, I want to stream." Bean's point of view, we can't file that. We can't take that domain. And we can't file a complaint against that domain. So it does come back down to having this contact and being able to reach out to whoever is responsible for that IP address, to say, look, you know, we're not necessarily have an issue with the IP, but what you're hosting on that IP, we do. And therefore it comes back to that two-way communication. What's your processes? What can you do about it? What's proportionate? In order to make sure that, you know, other users of that IP address aren't being impacted. But we need to get to that point in the first place, and that's where we're stuck.
Please.
Hi, Leo Vigoda from Anpolis. So it wasn't clear to me while you were speaking, and so maybe you can clarify. Are you looking for information about the subscriber or user of an individual IP address, or are you looking for information about the operator of the network?
The operator, whoever is ultimately, if you've got the subscriber to the IP address, then there is in my mind, and again, I'm more than happy to be corrected, there is a contract between whoever's using that IP and actually who owns or has taken leased that IP from RIPE NCC. And it's the focus for us is being able to speak to the organization who can actually do something about that, whatever way that is. You know, if it's a case of the responsible organization for that IP writing to their customer to say, we've had numerous complaints, please do something about it, and then some recourse from that, more than happy with that. Coming back to the PII question, do I need to know who that is? Not really. I just need to know something's going to happen if some form of action isn't going to be taken.
Okay, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I think that a lot of this touches on things that this working group under previous guises has discussed. I mean, this is why we brought the Abuse C contact into place. I mean, there's also, and this is me just speaking as me, you know, it's will there ever be a point at which there is complete accuracy of these things? And I mean, that's the world we live in, of people doing things and moving addresses and all of the fun and games that go with that.
I'm just skipping back because what our aim really is to change this. And this is just Bean's data for 1 month, and we'd like to change this ultimately. Small number of operators who are creating a fairly big headache for us, If we can switch that around, that would be really great.
Oh, please.
Sorry, regarding this, I'm Theodore Abraham from RIPE NCC. I was just wondering regarding the slide you're just showing, is this an indication of people actually only being from the RIPE NCC IP address space that are abusing your service, or is it more the case maybe that the English Football League is more of an interest within Europe?
No, this is, as I said, this is BIN's data. So this covers all of this.
I see. I see. Thank you.
So Hans-Petter Holen again, and since I love numbers, and Brian mentioned Abuse C, this working group put in place a policy for the RIPE NCCs to validate Abuse C numbers, and I will talk a bit about that in the services working group. But in 2019, when we started the Abuse C project, we did manual follow-up of more than 6,000 Abuse C contacts. This has been dropping now to around 2,000 follow-ups a year to verify that Abuse C contacts are correct. Now, of course, we're then validating that they are correct, but that's not any guarantee that anybody would answer those emails, right? So we can only go so far. We know that our 20,000 members actually pay, so the billing address or one of the other email addresses must be working. If somebody sends them a request that they do not want to deal with, well, then there is a problem with on the human interaction level, right? So, of course, accuracy of the registry is important to us. We have done a lot of work, both manually and automated, to validate Abuse C contacts, and we will continue that. And we will continue to do this for other contacts as well. So, you know, our goal is to keep an accurate registry so that you can actually get in contact with somebody, but to some extent, it's their choice whether they want to communicate with you or not.
No, thank you for that again. And obviously, we understand that with the email addresses, but in terms of if there's a physical address or location, so we actually know where the entity is that we're trying to elicit a response from. But again, another conversation we can have.
Okay, any other comments, questions? No, I mean, I think, yeah, it's a variation of another similar problem. But look, I think, you know, hopefully this week will be useful to you. And, you know, again, one of the things that we talk about and is around bringing more groups into the community, into talking about this, and the more conversations we can have and the more input we can get, the better it will be for everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you. So, I think it's almost a tradition that the meeting after we recharter is shorter, based on, you know, this being the second time we've done it. So clearly it's a tradition now. Is there any other business? Anything else people want to talk about? Please, yes, absolutely.
Brian, can you clarify, Farzan Abadi? So can you clarify, so the charter says that this working group is about security, stability, and resiliency. So I'm wondering where we can fit copyright infringement under this framework. I
mean, you know, I think it's one of those things, and one of the reasons we looked at rechartering was because when we moved from anti-spam to anti-abuse, we very much continually talked about abuse of internet resources. But over time, we had, as anti-abuse, we had a number of conversations. We did have presentations and conversations around copyright abuse, around pharma, around a number of things in that area. So as far as myself and Marcus and Tobias are concerned, it's there, and if people wish to, to discuss it, to talk about it, then I think this is the place to do it within the RIPE community framework. There's obviously lots of overlap with co-op. Co-op overlaps with almost everything, but I mean, copyright is one of those things that copyright abuse and how you're doing it, and it tends to end up being abuse of internet resources as well when you're doing that. But as far as we're concerned, yes, it is part of that, and we're happy to talk about it. And the charter is not owned by the co-chairs. The charter is owned by the working group, and the activities of the group are owned by the working group. So we're here to facilitate. So if that's something that the working group wants to talk about, then yay,
Yes, we should definitely talk about it, because I had the impression that this was the technical security issue. And it would, otherwise, if we expand this, and at ICANN we see this all the time, that they want to expand the mandate and include other things. So yeah, I think we should definitely talk about it.
Okay, cool.
Marco Dietrich speaking for myself. I agree with her. We are not talking about security issues. We are not talking about network abuse either, because while I have no special sympathy for the criminal gangs that run illegal streaming, they are paying customers of somebody. Network abuse is something else.
Yeah, I mean, again, there are multiple. For a simple working group, I should have picked a different one. There are multiple overlapping pieces, and look, we've had on the mailing list, we have the discussion of, well, what does consensus look like when there are people who are potentially involved in the conversation who profit or have vested interests in activities that other people disagree with. And I'm being very high level, and don't at me. The what is abuse alarm has just gone off. So look, absolutely, but we want to try and make this as broad. I think part of the thing we did with rechartering was try to acknowledge the fact that we weren't just talking about, we weren't talking about abuse of resources. We weren't talking about some of the things that I put in a charter a while ago. Not the most recent Berlin meeting, but the one before that. So evolving is important, and I think the ability to talk about that. So again, you're the working group. You tell us. It's not to abrogate responsibility. We're here to facilitate, but we are here to facilitate. And so if there's things that people want, we are but an email away. And I think in the times that that we've been co-chairing this, the number of times you said no to something is extremely rare. So let's have those discussions. Anything else, folks? In which case, I mean, this segues beautifully into the agenda for RIPE 90. RIPE 90. Jesus. Time. Linear time, man. Yeah, so again, we will be sending out emails looking for content, discussions, policies, all of these things, but that's a reminder in the future. If there's something you want to talk about, I mean, the mailing list is there. It'll be very new and shiny by next week, but the mailing list is there. Also, you can just talk to myself and Marcus. We will work with you, and bear in mind, if you want to do a policy, if you want to discuss a thing, it's not that you have to figure it all out yourself. That's why the co-chairs are here. That's why the NCC folks, especially around policies, are here. It's not safe to go alone. So actually, am I allowed to say that? Is that copyrighted? Who knows? But seriously, the support structures are there. We want to, make this community bigger. We've done a lot of work. We're doing more, again, work with law enforcement to bring more of them inside and talking. And I mean, I have, it's been talked about already. Governments are there. What Hisham was saying was around, what do we do before people make regulations? And this is a service region unlike any other. There are 72 countries which are very different in a lot of ways. And that's a conversation for over beer, but it exists. And absolutely no offense to our good North American friends, but I've had people from Aaron go, "Oh, it's simple. You just do this," and you're like, "Let me show you our service region." It's not just the EU. It's not even the Eurovision area. It's so much more than that, and that brings complexities of itself. But I think building that community, bringing more people in, we just have to keep talking and keep working together. So on that hopefully positive note, you all get a nerdy coffee break. Thank you very much for coming. As I said, please talk to us about more things you want to talk about, more things you want to do. And I will hopefully see lots of you both on the mailing list and in Lisbon in May of next year. Thank you very much.